Hello, everybody.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Doing
How are
well.
you?
Can you hear us?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Otherwise, that would make for a really short debate. Well, thank you very much for joining. I know Mike and I are very passionate about this topic. And while we have a lot that I think we disagree on, I think we have a heck of a lot more where we actually agree. But before I get into the specifics of the discussion, I figure we could just take a moment to introduce ourselves. So my name's Joseph McPhail. I'm the founder and CEO of WEquil, which is sponsoring this event. And this is my daughter, Sume McPhail. So she runs a lot of our production stuff. She's also the founder and CEO of Makeshift Homeschool, which is a subsidiary of WEquil. She's basically been working with a lot of young people to help folks that are, having difficulty during this lockdown to educate their kids. And so that's a lot of what we do. But I also rather relentlessly try to find opportunities to work with my kids to find educational opportunities. And frankly, I find it everywhere, but I most certainly find it in the reality of what's happening with this country. So I'll go ahead and stop there and hand it over to you, and feel free to introduce yourself, and would love to hear from the young people.
So I'm Mike Stark. I've been a political operative on the left side of politics for about 15 years now, since 2005, even before 2004 maybe. I started out blogging and doing political activism around talk radio, where I would call into Right One Talk Radio and kind of diffuse some of the mistruths. And from there, my activism crossed over into what I call meat space, the real world, where I did the same thing that I was doing with people like Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity, with the actual politicians, where I go up and confront Republican politicians about their dishonest statements. Sometimes that worked out better for me than others, but I always thought it was something important to do, a big part of citizenship that has kind of been lost in this country. I'm here with Antigone, who is a 10th grade. Oh, Antigone wants to introduce herself.
Yeah. Can you lower your camera just a little bit? Because all we're seeing is just the tops of your heads. We got a great shot of your ceiling. Oh, there we go. That's perfect. All right, okay. Fabulous. And can you get a little bit closer too? I can't hear you too terribly well, Antigone.
Okay. Is this better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. I'm Antigone. I'm a sophomore at McLean High School. I'm here because I consider myself a little less informed than I'd like to be. So I'm here to maybe hear some different viewpoints.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Aaron Stark. I'm an 8th grader at Longfellow Middle School. And I'm here because I like to debate. And I feel I am informed on this subject. So I'd like to debate the subject.
That's fabulous. And I got to tell you, Mike, you and your family are probably a bit better practice than we are. I was taking a look at your Wikipedia page before this started. I was like, wow, this guy, he's got a reputation. He's got some experience. We've never done this before.
I haven't kept that Wikipedia page updated. You're not supposed to edit your own page, but I can tell you that Wikipedia page kind of shows maybe 10% of the stuff that I've done as an activist. It's not a necessarily a point of pride. It just is what it is. When you've been an activist for 15 years, you do a lot of stuff.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and hop right into it. And you can feel free to. We actually have some of our marks are prepared. So one of the things I wanted to share right off the get-go is to clarify what it is that we're trying to do. We wrote an article called "How Americans Can Come Together." And Mike, you're not quite in the screen, by the way. We can't see your face. And the idea there was, our presumption is that we think Americans need to come together. Not all Americans, that's never going to happen. We have 340 million people in this country. And frankly, there are some people that are never going to agree to want to be part of a fair and democratic process. So I don't consider myself to be, an idealist in that sense. But I do think you need a strong majority of Americans to come together and have a shared understanding of reality, a shared understanding of what America stands for. And so, at least from our standpoint, we really want to know how Americans can come together. But in our discussion before we hopped onto this, I know you were having some debates about whether or not that's even the goal. So, but that's our goal. We want to figure that out. But you go ahead and tell me what you think the goal should be.
Yeah, I think that's salutary and aspirational. It'd be great if we could bring enough Americans together to agree on a unified path forward. Like when we came together during World War II, and we knew who our enemy was, and we knew what we needed to do to go defeat that enemy, and there wasn't a lot. There was a common purpose, and even in the years after World War II, it seemed like there was an America with a common purpose, mostly common purpose. There are exceptions to that. The lynchings that went on with Black soldiers that came home after World War II. I think there's a huge swath of America that said there was no common purpose even after World War II. But I don't think we can even get back to where we were in the post-war years or the war years. I think, and I don't think we should want to. I think we made a big mistake during the post-Civil War years, where we allowed the South to retain their dignity. They were fighting for slavery. They were fighting for principles that were excruciatingly anti-American, and we welcomed them back into the fold because we didn't want to make them feel bad. And for that reason, we had 100 years of Jim Crow, and we had 100 years of, just purely, it was an extension of our national shame.
That's still happening today. In our schools, we're still being taught that it's states' rights that the Civil War was fought over. Even in the 7th grade at Longfellow, you're taught it's states' rights, when any amount of research will obviously tell you that it is slavery and not states' rights.
So I think a much better path forward, even today, is something more akin to denazification, where you remove these corrosive people from polite company, and you don't give them a platform. I think if you really want to bring America together and re-achieve a common purpose and some semblance of unity, you've got to do something about talk radio. You've got to do something about Fox News. You've got to do something about, One American Network and Newsmax and all those ones. And you've got to do something about all of the existing Republicans in office that have kowtowed toward that far right wing in order to win votes and maintain their power. They're not responsible, and they don't deserve to ever hold power again.
They're corrupt.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. I think one thing that I try to do when discussing any topic where I feel I may have some areas of disagreement is to start where I agree, because I actually think that you and I and our families share a whole lot of understanding. So I want to get that out in the open first. So first and foremost, Trump is a failed president, and it should have been known to any thinking person, over the past several years, that what happened at the Capitol was likely, not inevitable, but it was always more than just a possibility. And actually, you can share. There's one post here, the picture, that first one, in the introduction. Go ahead and share that. So, I was writing about this on Facebook right after the election, that what Trump was doing was in some ways even worse than what states in the South were doing right after Lincoln was elected. Because, they didn't say that the election was fraudulent. They didn't deny the results. They just
Actually-
decided, well, we're just going to leave the union then. So it's like Trump, in some ways, that was even worse, is that he was actually undermining people's belief in the election process. So
I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to point out that Jefferson Davis, after the Civil War, said, "The South didn't lose, we were cheated." So the South actually did do exactly what Donald Trump has been doing. I guess I probably shouldn't have interrupted with that, but the reason I do is because I think that legacy, the Confederate legacy, is a big part of where we are today. It forms the base of the Republican Party.
So in my effort to find common ground, let me just clarify that I do think that if anybody is still supporting Trump at this point, and people that are denying the reality of what happened with the election, that what you may see as a conciliatory, let's try to come together attitude, I want to be really clear that I am not saying that we glossed this over. This is like a tumor or some kind of cancer. And you can't just say, well, let's bring it all together and forget about it. That's not what we're saying at all. So I want to make a clear distinction. I think I make the biggest difference, I think, between my views and what I see posted on social media and what I hear a lot of Democrats saying is that I make, I don't ever say, all Democrats or all Republicans do X or think X. That basically there's a clear distinction here between Republicans that still support Donald Trump and people that don't believe in the validity of the election, and Republicans that don't do that, that say this is wrong, but then may have a lot of differing political opinions with Democrats. And so I think painting this broad brush is dangerous.
I think that's exactly right. The difference between you and me is the width of our brush. I think you've kind of chosen a brush that captures Trump Republicans and people that remain Trump Republicans. But my brush captures not only the Trump Republicans, but the people from the Lincoln Project who ran ads against Max Cleland in Georgia, who was a triple amputee, calling him a Saddam Hussein sympathizer in the run-up to the 2004 elections to give Saxby Chambliss the victory. I think the Republican Party has been on a trajectory, an exponential trajectory, but that trajectory has to be excised from we have to go much further back on that trajectory than I think you think we need to do. You just cut off the asymptote at the end. I think all the building blocks before the asymptote need to be cut out as well.
Okay. I need to be able to see these.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think one of the areas where we disagree is in your proposed approach to this. You what did you call it? You called it the post-German denazification.
Yeah.
And so, and then also we need to stop, certain people from, maybe you could phrase it yourself again and just try to clarify what precisely is it that you think we need to do. Can you articulate that just very clearly for me so I can go ahead?
I think what we need to do is we really need to take away these people who are lying. We need to take away their voices. We need to cancel them. While it may seem harsh, we can't let them spread their lies any further because it's dividing America. It's doing the opposite of what our goal is. It's telling facts that are proved wrong, like the election was stolen. It causes these things, like what happened with the riots at the Capitol. It was caused by talk radio, Fox News, the president, and these people who, if we had canceled and we had taken away their voices once they started spreading lies, this would not have happened. So instead of trying to control the riots when they've happened or control these things while they're happening, we need to prevent them.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. That gives me something that I can respond to, I think, without misunderstanding. So what group decides truth? Now, in the case of the election, and in the case of the election, I think it's really clear, because you had something like 64 different attempts by Giuliani to go through the courts to overturn the election, and all but one were basically thrown out. And I guess that one was irrelevant. It wasn't a big deal. So in that case, deciding truth is I think really crystal clear. But what I worry about, go ahead.
There are cases where the truth isn't very clear, in which case which party decides what is true.
What's your mechanism for deciding what's true, and then if a politician says something that's not true, that they're booted out of office? Like, help me understand mechanically how you do that.
By quieting, is it only politicians? Is it only the president? Or is it every person who you believe is saying something untrue? Because that is...
I think we need to, it's a group effort. If we have one person saying this, it takes multiple people to turn an entire group of people.
So
unless you're super powerful.
So let me jump in here, because I think the process has already begun. You've seen corporation after corporation say that they are not funding any of these Republicans that spread the misinformation and voted against the certification of the election. There have been scores of companies that have said that they're curtailing their political donations. Not only that, but Josh Hawley just today was informed by the Lowe's hotel chain that they don't appreciate his role in denying reality and fomenting civil strife. So they are denying him the use of their property for a fundraiser he had planned for, I forget what the date was, but he's no longer welcome at that property. He's going to have to go someplace else. So I think the mechanism we use.
Bank also decided they weren't going to do more business with Trump, and you also saw the PGA golf organization say that they didn't want to do business with Trump. So now that I understand, if you have a private business, or in the case of Jack Dorsey taking Trump off Twitter, if you own a platform that is a private business, well, you have a right to decide that you do not want people to use your property. I understand that. I think that that's different, though, than having a view of, say, Democrats are going to have a lot of power. They not only do they have a lot of power in terms of Congress and the presidency, but you also see a very meaningful minority of Republicans that are rather disgusted with what's happened. And so, it wouldn't be surprising if some of them decide to become independents, or that part of their electorate simply tunes out. And so you have a situation now where Democrats are going to have a lot of power. And if they decide to do something like, say, enact a law that says nobody's allowed to lie about politics generally, not about the election, but let's say they say something that they determine is a lie, and then they use that as a tool to target political opponents and kick them out of office, that to me is something that I think could be very troubling. And if we were to turn the table around and 8 years from now, Republicans started using that same precedent to then target Democrats based on what they determine is a lie, this is a real slippery slope. And it's part of the reason why I think a lot of Republicans and certainly some independents and even a lot of Democrats are a bit concerned about how far this freedom of speech erosion goes in the name of protecting democracy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a clearly defined path, but let me give you the opposite, the other argument. because of those strong protections for free speech we had in this country, tobacco companies killed millions of people in the most excruciating way.
And vaping
Di-
now.
and vaping now. But dying of lung cancer is not a pretty ending for anybody. And
Another area where we agree, Mike.
and millions of people were killed because of these robust protections for free speech that we have in the United States. You know what? More people are going to die from climate change because of the climate denialism that we have allowed to go on for the last 30 or 40 years. The means of speech manipulation, the PR machines and persuasion industry, is infinitely more powerful than it was 30 or 40 years ago. So it's much easier to distort the science, to distort the argument, to give people that shouldn't have a voice in these arguments louder voices than the scientists, who should be probably speaking louder than anyone else. And as a result, probably billions of people are going to die. So I know in
There's
America,
only
we've
8
been
billion.
trained to recoil against the idea of any curtailment of free speech. But in the modern world, I think it's inevitable that some speech, we're going to have to rebalance the, I'm looking for the word here, but we're going to have to rebalance
it's a
free
tough
speech
question. There's no
versus
clear,
freedom from harm.
sure. I mean, so the freedom of a president to incite an insurrection, you know, that's obviously horrible. But I think that.
So let me ask you, what should be done to Trump for inciting insurrection? Or better yet, what should be done to the 170 Republicans in Congress that went along with his incitement, knowing better, and voted to decertify elections in the states? What should be done with those Republicans?
I think that that's a really good question, and I'm going to try to answer it. But I'm still trying to process this myself. So let me put it this way. I don't think that there's any way our democracy can survive if Democrats decide that, given their power, they pass a law that basically says that Republican officials that are elected officials by their electorate, they put them in office and they're supporting them, that they decide, well, because they did what they did, we can kick them out of office. Because if that happens, then you're going to see, you know, roughly half of Republicans right now are saying that they don't disagree with the attack on the Capitol, that they think, at least to some degree, that it was justified. Well, you're talking about over 35 million people. 35 million people that are disproportionately armed. And so I don't think that that's something it's not funny. This is really dangerous. And if you tell these people that they can, not only can they not have a voice because they've been kicked off all these social media platforms, and not only has their leader basically been removed from all these platforms and his ability to speak outside of, going up to the podium at the White House, and that's going to be gone in a week. And then you're going to also tell them, and by the way, all of the other elected officials that you supported, they did this one thing that is, I agree, completely wrong. And that I think, if they get out of office, then I think that there should be investigations into the degree to which they were trying to actually incite a violent insurrection, and that there should be investigations. But I don't think I think that if Democrats decide to use that to unilaterally fire all these people, that we can't come together. It's going to be really horrible. That to me is an 80% probability that we have a civil war in which a lot of people die.
Why do you want to come together with those people?
I don't think that we want to live in a country where 35 million armed, very angry people feel as though they don't have any even ability to share what they think. You can't do what are you going to do? Deport them? Jail all of them? Like the only thing you're going to do is powers of persuasion. And one of the only ways to do that is to help people feel as though they have some exhaust valve. That's what a democracy is to some degree. It's an exhaust valve that allows people's pain and frustration to be channeled in a way that's not violent.
Aaron?
So I want to also clarify what you were saying earlier. We wanted to take out people that were blatantly lying. So these Republicans that were in office that voted to overturn the election when they know it was not stolen, when they know that it was a fair and free election, that's what we would kick out. And look, these people might not be happy, but that's what we did to the Nazis. We took away, Hitler killed himself, but I'm not comparing these people to the Nazis because they're not nearly as bad as them. But we took away their voices, we took away their leader, and look where it turned out. It turned out well because Nazis, they're not a thing anymore. And there's neo-Nazis, but not really. And they're really taught that they were horrible people. But
a better example is probably Reconstruction. When the North occupied the South and took away the voices of the folks that led the Civil War, you had Black senators elected from North Carolina, and you had people that were there was a full blossoming of democracy. There were prosperous Black towns in Oklahoma and North Carolina. When the North moved out of the South and stopped putting down the rebellion, the post-war rebellion, what ended up happening were these, you've heard of the movie Mississippi Burning, or there were towns, prosperous Black towns in North Carolina, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, that were burnt to the ground by these white racists who felt so disempowered that they felt like Black folks were taking the power away from them. I'd rather live in the world where we took power away from the racists and empowered
Who
the noble.
Who's supposed to be quieted?
That's a good, how do you go about identifying? I'm not sure if I trust the Democratic Party as a group to decide who's racist.
okay,
Because that word gets tossed around an awful lot.
wait then. So I am biased because I am leaning more to the liberal and democratic side, but I do my research. I watch some Fox News. I listen to some highly conservative talk radio, and I have seen, and I can clearly tell that the Republican side, the right side, are the racist ones. Now they will tell you that, it was the Democrats who enslaved the Black people. They'll tell you those lies, but then when you actually think about it, you'll see that there's the big switch where the Republican and Democratic side switched over. So it's these little things, these remarks that their leaders are saying, like Trump saying these racist things like S-hole countries and not renting out his apartments to Black people, and many other horribly racist things that Republicans in office have done. And you constantly see people who are Republicans do that. It's pretty easy to tell that the Republicans are the racist side. Also, again, I am biased towards the Democratic side. So when I say, the Democrats are in power, now is the time to take away those lying Republican voices, stop talk radio, stop Fox News, because they're blatantly spreading lies. Well, I'm biased. Now, I don't think that we should take away the Republicans' views, because a good portion about conservative views is opinion. So, for example, abortion or lowering taxes. But then the other portion of it, like climate change, and those far right and conservative people who say climate change isn't real, which is going to cost billions of lives over the next century, possibly even more. is what we need to cancel out. And if those people are spreading lies, then we completely take away their voice. If they don't say it when we let them keep their voice.
So
I think we
I think
should.
the other thing I would say is that I'm not talking about a purge. What I'm talking about is Democrats flexing power to ignore those voices and make them irrelevant. So things you do is, look, even conservatives are fond of our founding fathers who famously went to war for no taxation without representation. So you make DC a state, you make Puerto Rico a state. You start empowering democracy by passing a Voting Rights Act that the Republicans who actually hate democracy and do everything they can to keep the wrong people from voting, you empower everyone to vote equally. And you pass national legislation to control gerrymandering. Right now, it's what Republicans have won a majority of votes for the president one time in the last 20 years, and they've controlled it for 12 years. Controlled the presidency for 12 years. They've won a majority of votes for the Senate. I think even fewer times that I don't have the stat in front of me, but it's rare that they win the majority of votes for the Senate, but they always control the Senate. So you break that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How many Republican friends do you talk to on a regular basis?
I have several Republican friends.
Aaron's got several.
Not from the way you've been talking, I'm sure you have lots of Republican
Trumpers.
friends.
2 of my best friends are Trumpers, and I have many debates with them.
I used to have one particularly good Republican friend when I lived up in New York who was actually a talk radio show host. And we'd go back and forth all the time. It's been my nature from the beginning of my entry into politics to seek out Republicans and talk to Republicans. So I was just on the Hill for this January 6th event, and I took video of me talking to people and asking them why they were there. It was mystifying to me why they were there at all. I mean, Black Lives Matter, when they have a protest, it's almost always because another young black male was killed by a white cop. When Occupy Wall Street was protesting, people were losing their jobs and being forced out of their homes by corrupt bankers that paid no consequences at all. In fact, they got bigger bonuses than ever before after they crashed the economy. So on the left, there were very clear reasons to me for people to be protesting and out in the streets. I couldn't figure out why people were up on Capitol Hill on January 6th. So I started asking people. And I didn't talk to too many because it was a dangerous environment. But 2 people I talked to both told me that the reason Joan Rivers was killed is because, and they did say she was killed. She didn't die of natural causes or because she got sick or anything like that. But she had gone on national TV and said that, oh, everybody in Hollywood knows that Barack Obama is gay, so she had to be offed. That's the reason these folks were up on the Hill protesting. That was one of the reasons in both of my interviews that was given for these people being up on the Hill protesting. All the QAnon shirts, all the, and granted, these people also felt like they truly believe that this election had been stolen from them. But I asked them, even if it had been stolen from you, tell me how it impacted your life. Tell me how it reached in and touched your life. If I'm Black Lives Matter and I see another black kid in the neighborhood being killed, I'm going to hit the streets.
So we already agree when it comes to the QAnon folks and the people that are still supporting Trump and the criminals that attacked the Capitol. I want to keep the debate and the focus and some of your comments that I want to dig into. I want to keep it focused on this much broader brush that you're that you're painting here, because you're making statements. So some of this, and you feel free to walk these back, but you're saying things like, you know, Republicans are the racist party.
And I
That
also, we should try to avoid making broad assumptions of a group of people, like Republicans and.
All right, so I'm not going to go too much into this, but John Crawford was killed in a Walmart after he picked up a BB gun, and a white guy called the cops and said he saw him loading a gun and he was waving it at people. Cops showed up and shot the guy summarily. Didn't wait a second. Turns out he had picked up a BB gun off the shelf of Walmart and ended up dying for it. Black guy. Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old kid playing with a gun in a park. 9/11 call, cops showed up and shot him. No questions. Philando Castile.
it has no relevance to the statement that I'm hearing from
1% of Republicans oppose the Black Lives Matter movement. I am not painting with a broad brush, is what I'm saying to you. I'm painting with an accurate brush.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and take that.
Extreme scenarios of Republicans who are being racist are the ones that you see in the news, you see in the media, because they are these extreme case scenarios. And that does not apply to all Republicans generally. And so I don't think that saying that all Republicans are racist or Republicans are the racist party is necessarily correct.
Well, it's certainly not correct, but even more importantly, it's not helpful.
Yeah.
It's
6% of Republicans support.
It only
Republicans support Black Lives Matter. What do you want me to do?
So let's talk about Black Lives Matter. So during Black Lives Matter, that group decided to take up a slogan called defund the police that Barack Obama came out 3 months later saying was wrong and actually helped Trump almost win the election.
Sure. So
that's true. So Obama came out and said it, but guess what? I was saying the same thing like 2 weeks after this started, and I was labeled a racist. I was labeled a white supremacist. I was called all these horrible names, but Barack Obama says the same thing 3 months later. So, but there's plenty of Republicans that decided I'm not going to support this group because I like my police department. My house was broken into 6 months ago, and I was really glad to have a police department. That doesn't mean that I think that every policeman is good. That doesn't mean that I don't think that there are some, racists in the police department. That doesn't mean that I, think that there shouldn't be reforms. But for you to say all Republicans are racist because almost all of them didn't support the Black Lives Matter movement, when it's clear now that Obama was bold enough to stand up to that, this is a failure, in my view, on your part, to acknowledge that painting this broad brush can lead you to make really extreme and inflammatory statements.
You just changed, you just shifted the goalpost. Barack Obama didn't say he's against Black Lives Matter. He said that.
He did not, but he said
that defund the police was bad messaging.
He said yelling out defund the police probably helped Trump get elected, and that maybe that wasn't such a good idea. But when you read a poll that says that the vast majority of Republicans don't support Black Lives Matter, then you need to have charitable interpretation. That's like the least charitable interpretation imaginable.
We've had 400 years of charitable interpretation for racists. How about some charitable interpretation for the people that say defund the police because police are killing their children?
Okay, let's take a step back and just acknowledge this particular point. When you said that because the vast majority of Republicans did not support the Black Lives Matter movement, given that slogan that they were chanting was something that Barack Obama came out later and admitted was probably not such a great idea, but really started to take over a lot of the message of Black Lives Matter, don't you think that could have accounted for at least some of the reason why Republicans weren't supporting BLM? Yes or no?
One black person does not.
I would have
for every.
I want
to that's a pretty straightforward answer or question. I just want an answer to that question.
I'm going to give you an answer because I can look at it. I can actually look it up. Civics has been polling this question exactly And so Republicans never got better than 30% supporting Black Lives Matter. And then it looks like around June, their support for Black Lives Matter just fell off a cliff all the way down to 6%. And their opposition towards Black Lives Matter, obviously went in a different direction. And I'm guessing that around June is probably when defund the police started out. It's also when the election season started out. So I would not be surprised if you're correct, your intuition is correct, that defund the police has a lot to do with at least 24% of the Republicans that do not support Black Lives Matter switching from support to not supporting it. So yeah, I think that's a reasonable bet, but at the same time, 7 in 10 Republicans never had any sympathy for Black Lives Matter. And
hey, that's fair. I get that they didn't have support for it, but this is a huge leap to say, well, they didn't support this group. And not wanting to support a group called Black Lives Matter does not mean you're a racist. Like, the term racist gets thrown around all over the place, and I think we need to be clear about.
As it means that you think a certain race is better than the other, and not supporting Black Lives Matter does not mean that you think that white people are better than black people. That's a complete.
Yeah, find me the poll that says that 90% of Republicans believe that white people are better than black people. Where's that poll?
Okay, no, can I talk? So first of all, they're not going to outright, most people are not going to outright say, I think a white person is better than a black person. Most racists at this point, they don't even realize that they're racist. It's these subconscious decisions that they're making where they question if a black person has a criminal record and they don't hire them because they're black compared to the white person who they think, oh, they're white. It's these subconscious decisions. Now let's go through history, all right? We got Democrats who were enslaving and fighting for slavery, but then it goes to the big switch, right? So the Democrats are really the Republicans now. So they were the enslavers, and the modern Democrats are the people who are fighting to not enslave people. And now a big portion of Republicans are in the South right now, the same place as enslavement was happening. Now you look at conservative Republican media. You look at Fox News, you look at talk radio, you look at all of these other posts where conservatives and Republicans will post. And I'm not saying that all Republicans are racist. I'm sure that there are many Republicans.
That's good.
I'm sure that there are many, many conservatives and Republicans who are completely equal and think that, and don't make these subconscious decisions, but they just have conservative opinions like abortion and taxes and gun laws, right? But I think a good portion of conservatives do make these subconscious decisions. I can't say the word decision. Yes, I've been.
So that's true. So there's actually I think, I can't remember if it was Harvard or MIT. There were some professors that put out a really interesting study. You can actually go to their website and test yourself to see how racist you are subconsciously. And so what they'll do is they'll have a picture of like some doctors of different colors, right? And then they'll have the word doctor flash, and you have to, or also people of different occupations, but you have to drag and drop it to the picture, okay? And what they find is that everybody, including black people, like everybody, Mexican, Chinese, everybody has these subconscious, it just takes them like, a few milliseconds longer to drag the word doctor to the black doctor dressed looking person. But it's but there's no correlation between people's stated political party, their gender, or their race. That is something that subconsciously everybody.
even if you did that, I would not call you a racist. Even if you didn't think the black person was doctor, because black people and minorities have been oppressed against throughout the years, so that it's more unlikely for them to be doctors or in places of power. Now, if you flash the word president on it, and you had a woman and a white old man, and then you pick the white old man, that doesn't make you a racist. It's just because, or sexist, because there's a lot less, 0 woman presidents. Even if there's one, Hillary Clinton was elected, that doesn't mean that you're a sexist. That just means that.
Let's not get derailed into the study. Just what I would say about racism is that you chose a very narrow definition of racism. I think I'm better than black people. Look, not being concerned about racism is racist. Not wanting to make a better world for people who've been historically oppressed in America is kind of racist because they're not caring.
So, well, this would be another area where you and I agree. And I would still say that we agree in many areas. So racism is real. Anybody that denies that, I think, is just, I don't know where their head is at. But to also say that we haven't made any progress, I think, is to also deny the facts. So like the definition of racism that we have here is shifted in part to say, well, no, it's a subconscious racism, or no, they hide it. Well, I've been to a lot of countries where it's overtly very racist and sexist, where it's not even, you look at the immigration policy of Japan, they don't let people immigrate to Japan unless they're Japanese. In other words, like you had to be Japanese and then leave and then want to come back. But otherwise, you can't go, right? That's racist, right? That's a very racist immigration policy. We have a very slow and inefficient, immigration policy, but actually one of the biggest groups that immigrate into the United States, Black women from Africa. I guess that's where most Black women are, is in Africa, if they're not here, but they're a large group that come in and they actually end up making more money than the average, white, like Caucasian family in the United States within 5 to 10 years.
Another area
Black women in Africa are not immigrating en masse to the United States decade after decade because they're looking around the world going, well, what place is the most sexist, racist place on the planet? Oh, America. Well, then we should go. That's not what's going on in their minds. I mean, yes, there are racist and sexist people in the United States, but the United States is also one of the only countries on the planet that has actually been wrestling and trying and working on this issue of how do we get people from all over the world to live together. When you look at the rest of the world, and it's like they've only just started, man. Like globalization really only kicked off after the end of the Cold War. And so basically you look at the rest of the world and they're all like cookie cutters where they all look the same. So it's not surprising that in the United States, we definitely have made progress compared to a lot of these countries for the same reason that the more liberal, progressive people live in the cities. Why? Because those are the places that have the most diversity, right? So to not use the same argument when you talk about the United States and go, well, maybe the country that has the most diversity, actually is doing better than the countries that never even let other people come in, I think is to ignore the reality and the facts on the ground.
So what I will say is that another area of agreement we have is that it's probably not a good idea to explicitly label close to half of America as racist. It's not a good idea. It's not right. It's an area of agreement. High five. It's not a good idea to say that out loud. But if we're speaking empirically,
we can secretly say it to ourselves.
That's exactly right.
Because that's not going to come out subconsciously in our conversations with our neighbors and friends and family.
But as an empirical matter, I mean, there are certain truths that have to be acknowledged. And if we're looking for a path forward that is going to excise the cancer in our body politic as quickly as possible, acknowledging those empirical truths, I think, is something that we have to do up front.
But your definition of empirical truth to me, you haven't convinced me, because you were just saying a little bit ago that, well, look, the vast majority of Republicans didn't support Black Lives Matter. That means that they're all racists. And, you know, I think that we made a pretty compelling argument that that's bullshit. So
if it makes you feel any better, I think that probably
Democrats' definition of empirical truth, Democrats decide empirical truth and then target whoever they want based on.
Well, they're in power, so I mean,
if it makes you feel any better, I think probably 2/3 of white Democrats are racist too. I think a lot.
I'm not
What's
trying
that?
to say we're all. I guess what I here's what I think. I think that it's real. How many people do you, Aaron? I have a question.
yeah,
Do you think that Antigone knows you really well?
yes, she probably knows me the
Like,
best.
But does she,
I'm not so sure.
like, what percent of you do you think she knows? Now, granted, this is after a year lockdown where she didn't have anybody else to talk to. So, you know, don't look at it, but what percent of Aaron does she really just get deep down to the core?
40%.
40%.
She really does not know me.
And she's your sister.
Yeah.
And she's been
No,
forced
she's pretty
to live
convinced I'm
with you.
something I'm not.
She's been forced to live with you for a year. She's the only one within a few years of your age, and she's been forced to basically be around you for a year, and yet she only knows 40% of all that
I
makes
think she knows me in certain ways and doesn't know me in different ways.
Now imagine for a second how much you don't know about the millions of Republicans that you've never met.
No, I do know a lot about them because of who they support.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think you can generalize all Republicans are racist.
I'm not generalizing. We never ever said that.
Okay. But
That's
I
the
think
thing.
you can generalize that.
And
all-
Antigone, come closer, and I want to hear this. This is great. We're going to turn Antigone on you. She'll come over to our place.
They're not.
I think you can generalize that Republicans who support racists are racist because racism wasn't a deal breaker for them.
Oh my God, Antigone, so well said. Thank you.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I
if
mean, yeah.
Republicans that
Somebody
support
ran on a
racists-
platform. If somebody ran on a platform of, hi, so my name's so and so, and I'm running as a racist. Like, I mean, help me out here. So, yeah, anybody.
74 million people just voted for a guy who tore babies out of their arms of breastfeeding mothers because they were brown coming over the southern border.
That sounds bad.
That sounds racist to me.
I mean, unless you're really misinformed,
And
But there's
almost-
not-
it's
these
hard to get
politics-
around.
These
and almost every Republican that I've spoken to, and I've spoken to a lot. Oh, you ask me how many friends I have that are Republicans? Everyone back up in New York. Everybody that I grew up with up in New York, my lifelong friends that I don't speak to that much anymore because I'm down here in Virginia. When I go back, I have to deal with all their Trumpism stuff. I come from that culture. My sister voted for Trump. And when I bring up this idea of the babies being separated from their
I can only see
breastfeeding
half
mothers
your
on
face.
the border, what's that?
It's like, this is what you
Oh,
look
sorry.
like. So,
Yeah, so when I bring that up with them, they're like, "You're breaking the law, man. Should come over the border. Come over the border legally if you're going to come over the border."
but
And
there's
that's
reasons
justification for stealing a baby from their mother in a way that they'll never be really reunited. And that's what we have to do to stop the immigration.
so this is another area where we agree is that people shouldn't take away babies from their moms.
You can't get out of it that easy, though. 74 million people voted for that.
You're talking about me getting out of anything? I didn't do anything. I didn't
You
do.
said that's another area we agree babies shouldn't be
I
taken away from the moms.
Yeah,
Well, and what I'm saying is
I
that
voted for Biden. I voted for Biden. I'm one of the most outspoken anti-Trump people you will ever meet. I have lost
Well,
friends.
that's not what's seeming to us. if I'm
totally
being
get it, though,
honest.
but it sounds like you're bridging into making an excuse, a possible
How
excuse.
could I make it? I just said that stealing babies from their moms are bad. What
So-
excuse
But
am
then
I?
you
So
say
you
you're not
agree with
racist
me?
for that.
That 74 million people are racist because they voted for that. You are what you do.
Okay. No,
Well,
there are
we said-
huge leaps of logic that you're making right now. And actually, Antigone made the point 2 minutes ago. And that is that it's not that somebody it's not like every one of the 74 million Republicans that voted for Trump watched with their own eyes, you know, Trump stealing a baby out of some mother's arms. One of the challenges that we have right now is that you have a very bifurcated, fragmented sources of information. And so, you know, for out of no fault of their own, maybe just because their parents did it, or because they're not even, because they don't have time to figure out what truth is, or because
So-
they're working 2-3 jobs. So they're not like out
This is
like,
what-
you know,
So hazard a guess, what percentage
let me
didn't
finish
hear
making
about?
my point. Let me finish making my point. That they are like going out of their way to try to, you know, do lots of research to try to figure out the truth behind a lot of these things. A lot of folks, and this includes Democrats too, watch whatever news channel makes them feel good and makes them feel righteous and makes them feel, oh yeah, well, I'm on the right side of history. Look at my
Well,
side.
I think
So great.
and then
But you know, it just happens to be that the Republican Party was ignoring some of these issues and then bringing up other issues. And so you can't then decide, well, because these people didn't do all this research, even though Democrats aren't particularly good at researching issues and making sure that they're, you know, not missing something that their side, you know, isn't proud of, that therefore all of them are racist. That's a huge leap of logic. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it's not a huge leap of logic, unless you can hazard a guess for me. What percentage of those 74 million people do you think had no idea that there was child
I don't
separation?
need to hazard a percentage. I'm saying that you can't say that all of them are racist. I'm actually making a much more clean argument than you. What I'm saying is you cannot judge everybody that's Republican and keep labeling this way because it's
Well,
not accurate.
The argument you just made was that they didn't know about it because media is, because we're all in our own silos. What I'm saying is, okay, fine. Let's say not every single Republican that voted for Trump knew about child separation. What percentage do you think did?
How are you supposed to know?
So
still a vast
let me
majority.
take a step back and talk about coming together, because Republicans have things that they can point to and say, you know, oh, well, the Democrats voted for this person and they said such and such. Like, I think one of the issues that Democrats actually had with Biden was that he supported some policies that ended up actually, you know, hurting and disenfranchising minorities. This was one of the reasons why they were concerned about that. Okay, well, if Democrats can be frustrated by certain things in their own party, then imagine how bad, basically what you just said, in the level of anger that you have at that, and the level of these people did this thing, therefore it's inexcusable, and you just condemn them. That is a path that will never lead to Americans coming together.
That's
And
not
so-
true. So this is my point. If you do that, if you start doing this and you take away these lying Republican voices, eventually,
What do you mean by taking away? Your dad said that purges are not allowed here. So
No,
you're gonna
not
clarify what you
the
mean by
lying
taking
one.
away.
We don't take away their opinion, but we take away the ones that say climate change is not real. This election was
What do you
stolen.
mean by take away? They
We-
live in America.
Everyone has freedom of speech. By saying
No, because these people, they have their platforms. Okay, look. So MSNBC can choose not to run Trump's speech. The company that owns the cable TV can decide not to run Fox if they're going to run Trump's speech. You can take away Trump's Twitter account. You can take away all these different things in these ways that people get to hear his voice. The newspaper places decide not to print Trump's voice, and he's completely canceled. These lying Republicans.
That's what your dad was saying earlier about how there's just a
And
lot of
eventually,
people are using their
eventually-
power and influence to basically.
and eventually after that happens, all of these conspiracy theorists, what would happen at the riot wouldn't have happened. Instead, they'll take a look back and say, maybe we should consider what the Democrats are saying. Or we can actually start to teach the right way. So you teach about the Civil War and how it was actually about slavery and how horrible America was during that time. And how it was an incredibly evil place to allow slavery. Instead of teaching the slaves were treated great, The slave masters often treated them well and let them have their own parties, and slaves were happy until the rude North came and take away their privileges. Instead of doing that, you teach
Were
them
you
the right
taught that?
way. Some people are taught that. In the southern states, they still teach that book.
Yeah, Texas.
And they have the books where they teach them that the slaves were treated right, and they often had their own parties. Like, this is still happening. No, at public schools, they have this textbook, and my history teacher, who actually did teach us the right way, like, in fact, multiple times during the school year, he was like, so according to the Virginia law, I'm supposed to tell you that it was states' rights, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't. And then multiple times they showed us this book of what they're still teaching, and it said these things, and that's what we cannot teach, because it's bringing out racism in the South. It's bringing out racism everywhere, and it just leads to this
We
giant
keep going back to
toxic-
racism. We have to move
I have-
on.
I have a question. Aaron. Last time that you wanted to persuade someone, how did you go about doing it? Like, if you wanted to persuade your dad to join makeshift homeschool, that you just really, really, really wanted to join, but he didn't want you to join, like, how would you go about? I don't use that example. Use an actual example, and taking to you too. Like, tell me a time you really wanted to try to, because it's important, and you're trying to get this point across. How do you go about doing that?
So how I go about is I ask him.
Blocking
Usually says,
with your hand, by the way.
okay. I say, hey dad, can I do this? Can I do so and so? He says no. So I say, okay, if I get all A grades, can I do this? And he says yes. And that's how I go about it. And that's the only way.
Okay.
Because he never agrees to anything. If there's my mom.
Okay. You didn't go, Dad, you're a racist, and then run out of the room.
No, I did not. But he's obviously the stuff that I want is not as important as.
Well, why wouldn't you take that approach though?
Because I don't
you can lead by example.
I don't
Because you can make them come to you rather than considering their feelings and trying to somehow enable their worst instincts. You don't validate these people.
I'm not talking about validation, but I do think that the only way that one can actually be persuasive is if they're vulnerable. So there's actually part of the reason why I wanted to bring Sume in on this and have young people in on this is that I want whatever solution, we talk about for Americans coming together, I want it to be consistent with the principles that I try to live my life by and the principles that I try to teach my kids. And I have a really hard time being comfortable with an approach to public policy that's not consistent with something that I could use with my own family. And just like in a marriage or in dealing with helping young people screw up real bad. And when they do, the only way to really move forward in a healthy way is for them to come out, acknowledge the problem, and work through that. But as you're a great dad. We've known each other for a while. Like, you can't help people to see the errors and be open-minded and to try to learn and grow and respect you if your approach to communicating with them is one in which you condemn them and tell them that they're completely morally inferior and that they should have no voice at all. That this is a way that, this is the opposite of persuasion.
What were you saying, Suman?
With you, if you tell them that they're bad or they're wrong, and in other words, that they're racist, and so that's just not the way to go about persuading people.
We're doing it right here in this call.
Persuading people.
Yeah,
I'm interested in holding people accountable for their actions.
And we should. And there's some people that they need to be held accountable. Trump, as soon as he's out of office, I hope that he is prosecuted. I think that personally he deserves to go to jail for a long time. I think these are strong.
We go back to
everybody that broke into that Capitol building. We should use machine learning models, facial recognition, whatever we need to do. We need to find them all, and every single one should be prosecuted. But that's not all Republicans.
So again,
But
we're
look.
going back to the size of our brush. I think I think your brush is much too narrow. You're giving way too many people the benefit of the doubt. I also think
So
that some of this has to
you
do
think
with our background. Hold on, just let me finish this
Are you
point,
saying
okay?
you should prosecute people for watched on the news and said, you know what? I don't know if I disagree with that.
In 2018, I went to jail 3 times. 3 times I went to jail.
Was it
I
doing
went
something
behind
fun? I mean,
bars
is this a
3
good story?
times in 2018. The first time was because I was covering as a journalist Ed Gillespie as he was running for governor. I'm sorry, this was 2017. So 3 times in the space of a year, 2017 and 2018, I went to jail. I was covering Ed Gillespie in his run for governor. And I was doing what you're supposed to do as an American, which is hold your leaders accountable. It's written right there in the Constitution, right to petition your government, free speech, and all the rest. So at one of his events down in Southside, Virginia, it was a black radio event. I asked him why he had George Allen on his campaign staff, who kept a Confederate flag in the news in his office. Why would you make him one of your campaign chairmen? So when he saw me at the parade in Annandale, he called down to the police upon seeing me from his bus and said, "Hey, I see somebody that looks like a terrorist over there. He doesn't look right to me. He might be some kind of threat." So the police came over to me.
You're a real shady looking character, man.
Exactly. Police came over to me and told me, "Stay away from that bus." And I told the police, "Look, I'm a reporter. I'm here to cover Ed Gillespie, and I'm going to be on him like white on rice. It's what I'm here to do." And the police swore at me, used a naughty word, and I swore back, and I ended up being arrested for curse and abuse. But it all happened because he called down and said a person that he knew was just a journalist asking him tough questions. He called me a terrorist. That's what spawned it. In 2018, I was covering the Secretary of the Interior as he gave testimony in Washington, D.C. At the end of his testimony, I had some questions for him. His press secretary, her name was Heather Swift, said, "Who are you with?" I said, "I'm with American Bridge." She says, "Oh, that's not real media, fake media." And as we're walking out of the room, she swiveled her hips into me, knocking me off balance, then looked up at me and said, "Stop pushing." And as I went out into the hallway to capture Zinke on video at the end, I hear behind me, "Yeah, that's the guy that pushed her." And I'm arrested and I go to jail for 30 hours and spend $10,000 on lawyers getting out of jail. And then I show my video of what actually happened, and the judge calls her a liar and says that I'm credible, and I'm found not guilty. Same exact thing happens out in Las Vegas later in 2018, October. This is Chief of Staff to Karl Rove, who was George Bush's campaign manager in the year 2000 and 2004, I think. She's now running Adam Laxalt's campaign, who is the Attorney General in Nevada. And there's a former Republican governor named Bob List there. Same thing. I'm trying to ask Adam Laxalt, who is running for governor, about his arrest record that he's never talked about and that he's avoided all press about. That's my job as a reporter, is to get these people on the record about what's in their arrest record. They attack me. I end up being arrested because I'm in a sea of Republicans and they're all highly credible, and I'm just a Democrat. I'm just a reporter. I end up going to jail again. These are the highest level of Republicans. These are the respectable Republicans. Ed Gillespie, the Attorney General, a former governor. What I am telling you is that the Republican Party is full of rot from the top to the bottom. And what we need to do to move forward as Americans and achieve our best is to marginalize the entire party, move forward as Democrats governing the way we should govern, make DC a state, enact a voting rights bill that respects democracy and makes sure everybody can vote, enact gerrymandering legislation that essentially outlaws it so that we have true democracy in America, and then the nation will heal itself over time. All the folks that have the marginal opinions will be outvoted. Their lives will get better. They'll see the error in their ways. They may never admit the error in their ways, but they'll come back into respectable company. because America will get to be a better place. You wrote something great about all the broken Americans in your piece that talked about the greatest generation and all that stuff. You were talking about how many broken Americans there are. Another area you and I agree. You look at the opiate epidemic and the number of overdose deaths. You look at the fact that the lifespan of Americans has decreased in recent years, largely because of the opiate epidemic. And America as a country is broken. And it's not a Democrat or Republican thing. It is
Not broken yet.
It is a thing.
I wouldn't.
There are some stress
I
fractures.
think we're a tougher country than you give us credit.
There's definitely some stress fractures.
I want to say something.
And we can heal them. But what you need to heal them is bold leadership.
Yes. Dad, can I say something?
Yes.
So what you were saying about earlier, about how we don't want to straight outright tell the Republicans, you're wrong, we're going to lead it this way. This was the exact same way of thought that happened during Reconstruction. And this led to
So
still.
you said something
still
about what I
racism going
said.
on.
So let me just clarify what I said. So just like basically what I'm suggesting is that you communicate when you talk about Republicans, you do it in the same way that I'm talking to you. So I had on several occasions, I've been very clear where I listened to what you had to say. But if I disagreed with you, I said, I disagree with you. I think you're wrong. And here is why. But at no point did I say, oh, I just can't believe these Democrats, they're just a bunch of commies, and then just went off.
See, this
I
is
didn't do
where
that with you because I'm not going to presume to know what you think.
I know, and we don't have to do that because right now Democrats hold power, and they don't have to do this argument. They don't have to directly tell them. They can just change the law because they have the president and the Congress, and they can just do this.
Okay.
And now look, this sounds a bit like a dictatorship, or not really a dictatorship, but this kind of sounds like
democracy working.
yeah.
A what?
But look,
He said choose your words wisely.
but if we had done this during Reconstruction, and we had said, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong for doing slavery after there's an entire war about this, think about what would happen. There would still be Jim Crow laws. There would still be all this horrible racism. But I can tell you with certainty that a big portion of the racism that we have today would not be here if we had done it right during Reconstruction.
And it
We
makes
had
my
just
point
sat
too.
down and just said, no, you are wrong. You are an evil person for allowing slavery. How can you see this mother with this child and say, they're less than me? They're an animal. I can treat them like an animal. No, you say you are wrong. You're a hate-filled person and you're evil. I don't care what you have to say. You're not getting slaves.
Actually, they didn't say that. What they did was they
They didn't
exercised
do that.
power. We passed the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. We outlawed slavery. We didn't take their opinions into consideration. We led, and we made our country a better place by doing the right thing. And that's
with regards to slavery, I completely agree. And I'd say that the parallel to today is kicking Trump out of office ASAP. And everybody that attacked the Capitol should be prosecuted. And Trump should probably be prosecuted. And maybe, certainly if they were actively trying to incite insurrection, any sitting Republicans that were trying to do that should also be prosecuted. So I have no interest whatsoever in trying to find common ground when it comes to attacking and trying to undermine our democracy. So
But if that's where you stop, you failed. Because those people that attacked the Capitol were the tiniest sliver of people with attacking Capitol in their hearts.
I guess
Those
I would
people that
prefer
can
approach
afford to
that
turn
doesn't
on
make that other
But
bit
how are you
gets
supposed
bigger.
to tell? Well, you're saying that the people who actually attacked the Capitol are just only a tiny sliver of the people who were supporting that.
So
But how are
is,
you
is
supposed
anybody that thought of supporting it, should we throw all them in prison?
No, I think I've said 3 or 4 times now that what you do is you ignore the supporters of the people that attacked the Capitol and you lead. You boldly lead. You empower democracy.
I agree with
Okay.
that. I agree with that.
And that fixes our country.
I think that's gonna be different.
You make Washington D.C. a state. You make Puerto Rico a
I'm
state.
really looking forward to our meetings with your kids, man. I'm having the greatest time hearing all their thoughts. It's so great. I mean, this is what I wish there was more of this going on, because I would imagine it can be very challenging for young people in school and listening to their friends. And of course, they know that their parents probably, have particular views that they're probably going to be biased toward because that's the one they're hearing all the time. It's got to be tough, right, kids? I mean, what's it like at school? Like, do your teachers talk about it? Do you talk about it with your friends?
Antigone had a teacher after my arrest.
Is it just like,
Also,
Antigone had a teacher after my arrest that walked up to her and said, "Yeah, we don't push women, do we, Antigone?" Because that woman, it was a woman press secretary in DC.
Mr. Aldridge.
all right.
That was Mr. Aldridge?
So
How's Antigone responsible for her father's non-crimes?
Oh my God, I'm gonna bring that up with Mr. Aldridge. I am bringing it up.
Peace with those who we disagree with.
Oh, well, so I'm gonna try to. I think we should wrap this up. I really appreciate hearing your thoughts. We'll probably write something about this and share this on our YouTube channel. But before I do, I'll run all this by you to make sure that you're comfortable with it. So if there's
I
anything,
feel like this was part one where you heard my solution. I haven't heard your solution.
Yeah, we really have.
so my solution is that I think that a lot of what I had to learn the hard way when it came to, well, you know what? I just had an epiphany here that actually made a lot of this clear for me as to my approach to this. So I feel like you telling the story about going to jail and then like you saying, this is the solution. We got to just, all these people that want to try to undermine our democracy, we need to marginalize them so we can take a leadership role and make this country better. That's the way we think, right? I thought that was a really good kind of like, is that fair? Is that like a concluding remark? Do I understand?
That's perfect.
Okay.
It's got a little bit more of the actor in it, but.
Well, I mean, I was a former wedding singer, man.
I know.
So let me go ahead and give my concluding remarks and feel free to jump in. So let me tell you where WEquil came from, because it's actually the same thing. So WEquil is a shorter version of our original blog called East-West Equilibrium. And I came up with that because my wife and I were having some challenges that I was like, okay, how are we going to get through these particular challenges? And the only way I know how to fix problems is for me to just study the heck out of it and deeply understand it. So I started reading a ton of books on marriage and communication and personality types and love languages. And I started blogging about them. And that was our original blog. It was eastwestequilibrium.com, but it's too long of a name. Just like makeshift homeschool. We're probably gonna have to call it something new. But I basically just spent all this time trying to figure out how to build better relationships and communicate. And so the idea behind East-West Equilibrium was this epiphany that, honey, because my wife's from China, that the best way that we're going to be able to move this marriage forward and do the best we can for our kids is if you and I can learn how to not just understand each other, but really collaborate and really deeply try to figure out who this person is that I'm married to, even though, man, do we come from opposite sides of the world, literally. The way that we think, our cultural differences. She is the exact opposite Myers-Briggs, opposite communication style, totally different love language, everything, right? And so, but when I could get it, when I could really sit down and just will myself to try to better understand, I mean, not only did it help us to have a better marriage and help our kids, but I got exposure to like a whole new way of thinking. It transformed the way I thought about all of my relationships, because if I can get to know, it's like what Aaron was saying earlier about how much Antigone knows. Guess what? I'll bet Antigone doesn't even know 10% of you, because people are so deep. Everybody is so deep in terms of the kinds of things that they can bring. And by listening to them, you actually help them figure that out themselves. And so when I think about our country, I think about our country as a marriage, because unless you get a divorce, which is the equivalent of a civil war, you have to find a way to come together. And I think that the parallel here is not a stretch. And what I see happening right now is I see the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse from John Gottman's, how to live a better marriage. Like, I see that all over the place. And it's a bunch of condemnation and stonewalling where people are so tired and so sick that they just don't even have, the courage or the emotional strength anymore to even listen to anything else. And so what I think this country needs is, I think that this country needs to take a really hard look at the kinds of principles that they enact in their own relationships, their own marriages, and their own parenting styles and relationships with their kids. And they try to use what they already know and how they talk to their neighbors. That's what I think.
So what do you think is more realistic? The Democrats' raw use of power to empower democracy, or everyone having this kind of internal Dr. Phil that, and I'm sorry for so caricaturizing what you just said.
Oh, it's
but,
fine.
But it does seem to me
I don't
like,
think that this is some fanciful thing. Here's what I think is actually going to happen. If you think that I'm fanciful, here's what I think happens. The Democrats have just been given the keys to the car, and we also just cut the brakes and removed the safety belt, because this country, having a country run by one party that is justifiably very angry, but also believes they're morally superior to the other party, and them just letting loose with that is a really dangerous recipe for what can happen. So you have Bernie Sanders, who's the one who's being put on the budget committee. I know more about economics than Bernie Sanders does. I really like him as a person. He was on Joe Rogan. He did a 2-hour-long interview there.
yeah,
Having somebody like him, in charge of the budget of America, that's just one piece of, you can start to spell out like where this goes if the Republican Party starts to splinter and just has its own little civil war.
you understand he got that through seniority, not
Sure.
because Democrats chose to put him on the budget committee. It's just the way the Senate works. But
So I'm not saying it's anybody in particular's fault. What I'm saying is that just think about any marriage. Like if one person in the marriage decides that they screwed up, let's say this is like the equivalent of like one person in the marriage having an affair. That's like deciding you're going to support Trump and ignoring all the lies and not even trying to help his base see, what he was doing and corrupting all these people. It's like the equivalent of being married to somebody who just went out and just completely, did the worst thing you can do in a marriage, right? Just completely unfaithful. But a big, big part of that person is coming back and saying, you know what? I'm sorry, I want to make this work, right? And so, but if the reaction to that is, you know what you did is so bad that from now on, basically, I just want you to go down to the basement, drink yourself into oblivion and never talk to me again, because you know what? This household and our kids are better off if I just run everything by myself. And that parent just goes and never listens to anything that this person ever had to say again.
It's like getting a divorce.
That's the base case scenario, in my view, of what Democrats are going to do with the power that they have right now. I don't think that there's going to be any reconciliation. I thought that there might be, but what I see is aggrandizing, and we're morally superior, and we're going to, basically use every opportunity to just stamp on Republicans so that they can't ever rise up again. And you can't.
What do you think Democrats are going to do to Republicans that is that terrible?
I think that anytime somebody thinks that they're right and doesn't think that they need to listen and is unaware of the fact that there's things that they don't know, and then they're given the power to do everything, then I think people make mistakes. I think that the folks that
When you're surrounded by everybody, by just people who agree, who think the same way that you do, there's going to be nobody that challenges you on the things that you think. And even if you do make a mistake, there's nobody to tell you that it is a mistake until it happens and you see the consequences.
or even then you just bury your head in the ground. Like one reason why I thought Barack Obama, and I still do think he's such a great leader, is that he went out of his way to seek other opinions, right? This is one of the reasons why he was one of the only people Democrats would listen to when he came out against the slogan of defund the police, because he has that kind of strength. He has that moral courage. He's a very, well, he's just a very courageous guy. He has a lot of, feeling of self-value, so he doesn't need it validated by other people all the time. But I don't.
Barack Obama, you're so wrong.
So what Sume said about where there would be no one else to make a point against you and you would have all the power. I think that's more of a scenario where in the family, the Democrats are the parents and now the Republicans are now the children who still are going to do everything in their power to get their way.
Your analogy is exactly what I'm talking about with regards to moral superiority.
The Democrats have the power, so it's up to them. And if
And
they
therefore,
think
all Republicans
right,
are children. I mean, this is.
and if
this
they
is
think that they're right, they're going to do what's best for the family, the country.
Your articulation of the problem is what I consider to be the biggest risk going forward.
And I sure wish that we had had this conversation when Mitch McConnell was packing the courts and stealing Supreme Court seats and changing the rules of the Senate to exercise.
I think that the Republicans would do the same thing if they got all the power.
Definitely.
They did. They had all the power for the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency. They had all the power, and they confirmed 2 Supreme Court justices with 51 or 52 votes, which had never been done before.
So maybe condemning the other side and calling them children isn't working. Maybe we should try something else.
No, I'm just saying that they're the ones with no power anymore. I'm not calling them children.
What I'm suggesting to you is that politics, I'm sure somewhere in the Latin, power is a part of politics. And the idea that you win power and then don't use it is a formula for the people not trusting you with power again. The people that voted you into office put you there to change the country and make it better in their eyes. And
I completely disagree. The United States did exactly that right after the end of World War II. We had all the power, and we decided that we were going to use that power to try to create international peace. And we spent a lot of time and effort working with other countries. We helped rebuild Japan and Germany. Like, we were the principal financiers that helped Japan and Germany rebuild themselves. We did not just take every opportunity to just destroy them and keep them in poverty. That's what happened. That's what happened after World War I, and that's why we got World War II.
Sure. So there was some enlightened self-interest after World War II, but at the same time, what did we do to Iran? And I forget the guy.
This is the example I'm sticking with. If you know the difference between World War I, what happened, and then what happened with World War II, and why we've had 75 years of international peace for the most part, that's why. It was because we decided to be bigger. We decided to actually do what Michelle Obama said, and that is that, when they go low, we go high. I'm saying Democrats, I'm really hoping they go high. I'm really hoping that they learn that they actually will have more power to influence if they show that they're able to listen. When they didn't have to.
Listen to what?
To the table.
Listen to what? What is there to listen to?
And you know what? If you think that they're just a bunch of racist, backward children, that's the kind of response you're going to have to what I said.
I actually have a question for you. Listen to what?
What of value should we be listening to?
I disagree with you.
It's about, you won't know until you start listening.
We know
Do
what their
you, but you've been listening, so I'm asking you, what is there to listen to?
There's a lot. I mean, I have, thankfully I have a fair number of Republican friends that I've managed to keep because I am not calling them names. And they have a lot to say.
And what
And
if
I
you learn
would,
from them?
I wouldn't.
I mean, hang
This,
a carrot in front of me. What have you learned?
I gave a really good example. I use this one on purpose because it's recent and it's fresh in people's minds. If I think that Trump got really close to winning, right? Why did he get so close to winning the election? That should really concern people, right? There were so many reasons why he should have not gotten any votes, right? And I agree with Obama. One of the reasons why is that Democrats scared a lot of people, including me, with their calls to defund police departments, and Democrats weren't interested in listening to any Republicans pointing out that this wasn't a good idea to be saying this, and then just saying, oh, that must mean that you're racist. Like one of the top editor, one of the most prestigious economic journals in the world said, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement has really put themselves in jeopardy when they keep talking about defunding police departments, and he lost his job. He was fired just for putting out a tweet saying that. The same thing that Obama said 3 months later, but guess what? He doesn't have his job back. So that's the kind of thing that can happen if if Democrats decide to drive that car believing that, you know what, they don't need any help. They don't need anybody, you know, checking the navigator to make sure that they're going the right way. They don't need a seatbelt because they got all the right answers. Now we got the power. So, you know, we're just going to floor that thing. There are lots and lots of examples, but yeah, it's, you know, what you want me to like come up with a list of, actually I do. I have, I wrote an article called Our Tribe 2 or 3 years ago on our blog. And it was one of the first pieces that I wrote about politics. And I gave a bunch of examples of where Democrats and Republicans are arguing, but you know, they both have valid points and they should listen to each other. So I already made this list. I made tons of them on Facebook. But you should listen to them for yourself. You should find out for yourself.
So look, you're talking to a guy that exposes his kid to right-wing talk radio on a daily basis. My wife listens to NPR.
I don't even do that. Man, you're more open-minded than me. That was
NPR, and we listen to talk radio during the day when we're in the car or wherever, and we watch MSNBC at night because you got to get some truth.
We gotta get some in the middle, man. You're just like, we're gonna listen to the most extreme on this side and the most extreme on it. See, kids, everybody's crazy. Like, come on, man.
I don't think MSNBC is crazy.
You know what? There's another approach.
I watch Fox on YouTube.
There's another. I would stop watching all that. Honestly, you know who you should listen to? You should get yourself a list of people that you follow, like people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk, folks that have shown themselves to have really deep insights into something that they're a leader in and they're super passionate about, and have them read and listen to these people like Jack Ma, Paul Graham. Like I gave Sume an article by Paul Graham, he started and still the most prestigious startup incubator in the world called Y Combinator. And the article called Lies We Tell Kids. And it was just this most amazing article about how most parents wouldn't have the courage to do what you're doing right now. To actually sit down and have their kids have an open discussion with somebody that they disagree with. To just like let their kid just talk and share their views. To not have so much fear of them failing that they have to just be kept in a wheelchair until they go to college, and all of a sudden they have to like be a grown-up. Like, right. It takes courage to do what you're doing, and it takes honesty. And he basically laid out this case for honesty with kids, and it transformed the way I parented. I printed that thing off, handed it to Sume. It had F-bombs in there and everything. I said, I don't care. You know, I'm just gonna let her. Wow. I want her to see. I want her to think, and
That's why you're so vocal.
But I
Right.
wouldn't, but you're not going to get any of that. You're going to get the worst. It's not even news, man. What they're trying to sell is they're trying to basically just, scare people into keeping your attention, right?
Yeah.
Our
The
brains
thing
are
that
wired
keep
to
your
pay attention to
attention.
anything
That scares them.
that threatens us, right?
Yeah.
Because
And
that's
I'll tell you, I think I have a deeper understanding of the Republican guest show than you do.
no,
because
I don't think
because
that
I listen to their
Fox
thought
News
leaders.
teaches you about Republicans, man. This is why we have differences of opinion about Republicans, is that Fox News does not determine the Republican platform or what Republicans actually think as individuals. Because they are individuals. Every single one of them is an individual.
So, but what they think really doesn't matter. What matters is who they elect. And who they elect are the folks that rely on Fox News and talk radio.
They
to
think
get it
live
reelected.
who they elect, and you can't, do you think that you're completely defined by the fact that you voted for Biden?
No. of course
No.
not. Just
Okay.
because I just-
Well, they're not defined by the fact that they voted for Trump.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I think there's a big difference between me voting
No.
for Biden.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
I-
So the
No,
fact
there's-
that you voted for Biden doesn't determine who you are, but the fact that they voted
Notwithstanding the fact that my own sister voted for Donald Trump, I think anyone that voted for Trump, there's a failure of citizenship and there's a failure of morality. I honestly believe that, I tried to pin you down on the percentage of Trump voters that voted for him knowing of the child separation policy. If you can do that, you need to be held accountable. And the way you're held accountable is that you don't have a voice in politics anymore. You're marginalized. We're moving on from you. We're going to go do the right thing because you don't know what the right thing is.
I think there should be limitations on voting. I don't think it should be anyone over 18 can vote anymore as long as you're legalized. Because I think you should have an IQ test for voting. Honestly, you really should.
Yeah.
Really glad
No,
we had this.
also-
Aaron's getting tired, I think.
Also-
We should wrap this.
I think so.
Also,
It's okay, Aaron. Some of this stuff we're probably gonna edit out.
also,
We'll have a good discussion with your dad. I love your open honesty. I think it's really important to share and talk about these things because I think it's important that we get an opportunity to walk you through why that would be really bad. Because I think your dad and I are like completely on the same page. You can't.
but look,
The reason why
has barely educated themselves on voting.
The reason why is because you don't know how people are going to use that power. You don't know. You don't know how those laws
Power
down the
corrupts,
road
absolutely.
are going to be used.
It's used in a movie before.
Just like the Patriot Act. Your dad and I are old enough to remember, when that was passed, that a lot of people thought the Patriot Act was, oh, this is a good thing. We're going to be able to protect Americans by giving our government the right to spy on people, even Americans, even people in our own country, right? I don't even think you could spy on Americans in it, but it basically opened the window. And then for a decade later, the same act was being used to do things that we had never even imagined that could be happening, that were extreme infringements on our individual liberties. So when you think about the power of government, Aaron, hey, well, this is great.
This was fun.
I really appreciate it. This has been one of the most valuable experiences of our whole lockdown, I think.
It is neat how we've come to
We agree on a lot.
how we've come to our disagreement, I guess, and how we've come to our agreement.
I don't know. I still think we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. I'd say that perhaps the only area where we really disagree is I'm very worried about the tail risk of any party, any group of people that thinks, even if some of it's justified, that thinks that they're morally superior and is very, very angry. And when they get all the power, what they do. I think anybody that's studied history can look at that recipe and say there is potential for very bad things happening.
That's
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the complementary risk that you're speaking about, that's what I took away from what you were saying. All the folks that are marginalized but have guns.
well that
Um,
I think we agree on. I think that's a real, and it's also like, how do you help these folks to, how do we limit some of that risk? Because there's also people at the margin. There's a lot, like huge group of people at the margin that Democrats could bring into this fold if they didn't make it so hard. My goodness, Democrats could do so much more to help people like, like Mitt Romney is a Republican. This is one of the most boldest, strong, greatest leaders that America's ever had in terms of like his willingness to stand up to his own party, to speak
Yeah.
his mind, And so every time that you say Republican, like you got Liz Cheney, her statement, and she came out right away after this happened, and she was like, "Look, this is
floored me. Could not believe it.
well, but you want more people to follow her, and when you see some of the things that like AOC is spouting on Twitter, AOC is doing more to stop Republicans from opening their minds than any Republican ever could right now. Like she just is doing everything in her power to just make these people stay angry and hate Democrats. Like,
Yeah.
let's all rally around how wrong and bad
Again,
it is.
Again, the activists in the Democratic Party, myself and AOC included, we heard from Republicans enough after 2016. F your feelings. This isn't a revenge thing with F your feelings from us
There's a
responding back to them.
There's a lot of revenge on the minds of plenty of Democrats right now.
Well, there may be, but the idea is that we need a Green New Deal. We need to arrest climate change. We need to do something about student loan debt. The government screwed up the student loan program so badly.
Involve enraging 35 million potentially armed Republicans.
And by just telling them that they're bad people, you're not going to change anybody's mind.
I think we were hitting on a lot of stuff we agree on. I think this is great. The best part is I called it a debate mostly to try to keep it, I was hoping maybe I add a little bit, make it entertaining. What'd you think of that intro, kids? Did you see it? That was pretty cool.
We did.
We
Very
put that
impressive.
together in 15 minutes right before this thing.
What do you use? Do you use
That was
What?
stressful.
what do you use?
Dum. I'll tell you what.
What software do you use for your video editing?
Let's talk all about it. Oh, it was on iMovie. But
Oh, okay.
I really I got to get in this plug for makeshift homeschool because we're still.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We are going to be your newest participants.
Well, we're going to have chats with your young people one at a time and make sure that they really want to do it themselves because it's the only way this works. So we're going to schedule some chats. We have this really radical idea that kids will actually learn faster and become more creative and better leaders if people ask them what they're interested in, and they get to make projects and share it with other people besides just their teacher, and also practice public speaking and collaborating with other young folks. And so it's a very self-directed, project-based, real-world style of learning that, frankly, I started accidentally doing with my daughters like 4 or 5 years ago. And then just recently, a few weeks ago, we woke up and was like, why don't we just do this with all the kids we know? So